This week, I'm coming at you with the differences between college in Slovenia and America. This is like the perfect, most amazing, beautiful day ever. You're really going to enjoy this video, so make sure you stick around until the end. And please let me know which points you like the most. All right, so this week I'm gonna talk about my experience in college in America versus my experience here in Slovenia. I went to 2 colleges in the US. I went to one liberal arts college in Vermont called Middlebury College. Then I transferred to Baylor University in Texas, Baylor University, Signal Bears. But my experience at both colleges was really different. But yeah, I'm just gonna touch on my experience and what some of the big differences between college here in Slovenia and the US are. Okay, so we're gonna do the differences. We're going that way. We're gonna do differences between Slovenia and the US schools, colleges specifically. I have a bit of experience, but I'm going to share my experience of what the differences are. If you like any of the points, or if you want me to talk about them a little more in length in the future, just comment like which point you're more curious about, and I'll talk about it at length in the future. This is gonna be more of a listing of items. There's 32. Okay, so number 1, the Študentski Boni program. In the past, I've talked about Študentski Boni. It's absolutely amazing. Across the city, restaurants are capped at $4.98. That's what they can charge the students. In the US, you do not have a program like this. It's very expensive to eat out. It's just like a normal meal. There's no discount for a student. Point number 2, the business school would never allow you to give out mulled wine. During the Christmas season, they were giving out mulled wine just in front of the faculty. In the US, this would never be possible on campus to give out the alcohol, at least from my understanding and my experience. Point number 3, there's no sports teams at the university. In the US, almost all colleges have a sports team or multiple sports teams. This is a very big part of the student life in the US. Point number 4, no registration for exams. In the US, if you're in a course, you just show up to the class and take the exam. You don't have to register online. That's really different for me. Point number 5, in the US, you would never challenge the professor. Here in Slovenia, hey, just want to pop in real quick. Please hit the like button below, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tune in every Sunday for a new video. Thanks, see ya. Students are always calling out the professor and making sure that their point is actually true. It's really kind of like challenging them. In the US, it's very, you kind of stay in your lane. You don't really challenge a professor unless it's a one-on-one. You might ask them a question. But here in Slovenia, you really can ask a question and kind of call out the professor in the middle of the course, and that is very new to me. Point number 6, in Slovenia, there's a lot more teamwork. In the US, a lot of stuff's done individually, and so far in my experience, we've done so much teamwork here in Slovenia. Point number 7, this one's no surprise to you, but schooling here in Slovenia is a lot cheaper than in the US. If I was to go to school in the US, it would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Here in Slovenia, I still have to pay a fee since I'm an international student, but it wouldn't be nearly as much as I would pay if I was in the US. Point number 8, in the US, you only get 1 exam attempt. Here in Slovenia, you can have up to 5. The last 2 are paid, but the first 3 are free. Point number 9, in the US, you normally have a week off before exams. Here in Slovenia, you don't really get that week off to prepare for exams. You kind of have to do it all together. Okay, so the 10th thing is that in the US, all of the social gatherings and parties and stuff like this happen on the weekend. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's because most students live where the college is. Here in Slovenia, students often return home on the weekends. And so because of that, the gatherings, social gatherings, parties, etc., are on the weekdays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which is much different than the US. Point number 11. In the US, there's a crazy race to sign up for classes. Maybe it was just my experience, but here in Slovenia, it's been much easier because I've been working with the administration office, and so it's made it so much easier. In the US, if you don't get in line in time, you're not gonna get the classes you want. So it's much different and very competitive. Hey, I want to give a shout out to someone for buying me a coffee via my link below. Buy me a coffee. Cheers. Point number 12. Here in Slovenia, people are allowed to, depending on the professor's language expertise, people are allowed to respond in different languages on exams. In the US, it is only English. From my understanding, maybe in some scenarios you could write in Spanish, but for the most part, it's only English. Point number 13. Point number 13, in the US, people do not dress up as much for class. Here in Slovenia, people dress up a lot more for class. And just in general, socially, people dress up a lot more. In the US, you see a lot more like pajama pants and sweatpants and things like this in social settings. In Slovenia, you don't really see that, maybe only with a really young crowd. Point number 14, the commute to the university is much different than in the US. In the US, people walk normally, I would say, or take a car, drive a car. That also is the case here in Slovenia, but people also come by train or by bus as well. In the US, you don't really use the train or bus as much unless you're maybe in a big city. Point number 15, in the US, the living situation at the university is much different. Here in Slovenia, some students still do live in dorms near the campus, but also since so many people are from this area, they live at home and just commute to the university. And then again, I spoke about this a bit earlier, but on the weekends, people will go home. In the US, normally when you go off to college, you're kind of just there. So you're there at college the full time. Maybe some people do commute home a lot or live at home, but I would say from my experience, I was at college and then I would go home for maybe Christmas or different breaks. So I wasn't home as much. So the living situation is a bit different. Point number 16, in Slovenia, you get discounts on the bus card and at the library, you get discounts. In the US, you don't really have these public discounts. Everything that you pay for is through the university, or at the university, I should say, on the campus. Anything outside the university, it's not included in a discount. Point 17, the number of classes. So in the US, I've had two structures where I took 4 classes, and then my other structure was 6 classes. I would say normally it's along the 6 class system. Here in Slovenia, I believe everyone takes 4 classes a semester. But the college I graduated from in Texas, we actually had 6 classes per semester. Point number 18, the structure of the courses. In the US, you're always with a professor, at least from my experience. Here in Slovenia, sometimes you're with an assistant, sometimes you're with the professor, but it really depends. In the US, you're pretty much always with the professor. So it's a lot different, just style of courses. You also don't have seminars and lectures. Everything in the US is just class. So you just go to the course. Point number 19. In the US, exams actually have a lot more multiple choice. So far in my experience of Slovenia exams, it's a lot more free response. So you're kind of regurgitating information. In the US, you would just circle or choose a multiple choice answer. Point number 20. In the US, the length of classes is much shorter. Typically, my classes were between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes long. Here in Slovenia, my classes range from 2 hours to 4 hours. So they're much longer with a break in the middle, which is much different than the US course system. Point 21. In the US, everyone attends classes, or at least for the most part. There's normally attendance policies, but here in Slovenia, a lot of people just don't go to class because they don't need to, They have PowerPoints and they can just study from this. But in the US, pretty much everyone goes to class. In the point 22. In the US, Point 22. In the US, it's very common for teachers to have office hours. Here in Slovenia, it's not very common from my experience for professors to have office hours. People normally, I don't think, go as much to the professors, whereas in the US, you're spending a lot of time at the professor's office, learning a bit more, asking extra questions, and just developing a deeper relationship with the professor. Yeah. Ooh. Point 23. In the US, there's not as much clubs near the campus. Here in Slovenia, people do a lot of clubbing. In the US, it's a lot more house parties. Point 24. Point 24. In the US, it's actually not as common for students to have jobs as it is here in Slovenia. People really only just attend courses. Point 25. There's no coat racks in the classrooms in the US. Point 26. There's not as much free flow in the classroom in the US. Here in Slovenia, people are constantly getting up and out of their chairs and going to the bathroom or just stepping out for a minute. In the US, once you sit down, you're pretty much there for the whole class. Point 27, there's no breaks in the classes in the US. Here in Slovenia, you normally have a 15-minute break during the course where the professor says to go get a coffee or just step outside for a moment. Point 28, professors don't normally allow phones in the classrooms in the US. Here in Slovenia, it's very normal to see people on their phones. Point 29, there's no coffee machines in the school in the US. You have to go to a coffee shop or bring coffee from home. Here in Slovenia, they actually have coffee machines inside the building. This might be the greatest find we've ever had. Point number 30, brands like Pepsi advertising at school in Slovenia. I see them at the Ekonomska fakulteta all the time. In the US, you really don't see brands advertising unless it's companies advertising for students to come work. Point 31, here in Slovenia, these business organizations at the university are promoting the club pretty much every day, it seems like. In the US, really you only have certain days that the clubs promote on campus, like with the table and stuff. But here in Slovenia at the university, I'm always seeing certain clubs promote basically every day. Point 32, here in Slovenia, you actually have a lot more company presentations in the classroom. In the US, you also have them, but it's just not nearly as frequent as it is here in Slovenia. All right, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Also, I'll be expanding on some of these points in the future, so please let me know which ones you want me to talk about. Also, if you have any questions, I think I already said this, but point them below. Did I already say that? I don't know. Hey, if you made it this far, might as well follow me on Instagram. This is my page.